Get out and take your stuff with you!
Dad, please, it's freezing!
Get out, pack your bags and leave. You've been a burden on this family for 24 years, and we are finally done with you. My father, Arthur, didn't even look me in the eye when he threw my black garbage bags onto the ice-slick driveway. My mother, Beatrice, stood behind him, crossing her arms, her face a cold mask of absolute disdain. My golden child brother, Julian, stood on the porch sipping eggnog, a smirk plastered across his face. It was December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. Outside, a brutal blizzard was howling, dropping the temperature well below zero. "Dad, please," I begged, shivering as the freezing wind whipped through my thin sweater. "It's 3 days before Christmas. I don't have enough money for a hotel until my paycheck hits next week." "Not our problem," Julian sneered, stepping down a plank. "Maybe if you weren't such a useless failure, you'd have your own place. Dad's turning your room into my private gaming lounge. You're holding this family back, Clara." Beatrice nodded in agreement. "We're tired of carrying dead weight. Hand over your house key, Clara. Right now." With shaking, frozen fingers, I handed over the brass key. Arthur slammed the heavy oak door so hard the wreath dropped to the porch floor. The lock clicked. They locked me out in a freezing storm to die, just so my brother could have a room for his gaming console. That was their first mistake. They had no idea what was coming. To understand why Arthur, Beatrice, and Julian hated me so much, you have to understand how our household worked. I was always the invisible daughter. Ever since my sweet, brilliant grandmother Eleanor passed away 3 years ago, my parents treated me like a glorified maid and financial sponge. I worked 60 hours a week as a mid-level paralegal, handing over half my paycheck to help with mortgage costs, while Julian, a 26-year-old unemployed bully, was lavished with brand-new cars, designer clothes, and endless praise. Whenever I tried to stand up for myself, Beatrice would gaslight me into silence. "Family sacrifices for family, Clara. Don't be so selfish." Grandmother Eleanor had been the only person who ever truly loved me. She was a quiet, unassuming woman who lived in a humble cottage, spent her days reading, and adored me endlessly. When she died, Arthur and Beatrice scraped through her modest belongings, found a few $1,000s in a savings account, split it between themselves and Julian, and threw the rest of her stuff in the trash. They called her a crazy old woman who died with nothing. I spent December 22nd and 23rd sleeping in my beat-up 2012 Honda Civic, running the heater in 10-minute bursts until the gas tank hit empty. By the evening of December 24th, Christmas Eve, I was completely out of options. Frostbite was setting in on my toes. Defeated, crying silently, I walked into the downtown Haven House homeless shelter. I felt stripped of all dignity as I took a paper bowl of lukewarm soup, sat on a creaky metal folding chair in the corner, and pulled my coat tight around myself. Nobody in that room knew the truth, not even me. The shelter was loud, filled with the sad echoes of desperate people just trying to survive the night. As I stared at the floor, wiping away tears, an elegantly dressed woman in a tailor-made charcoal coat stepped out of the director's private office. She looked completely out of place in a homeless shelter, carrying a sleek leather briefcase and scanning the room intently. Her eyes landed on me. She paused, walked over, and sat on the metal chair next to mine. "Excuse me, dear," she said, her voice surprisingly soft and refined. "Are you all right? What is your name?" "I'm fine," I whispered, my voice cracking from crying. "My name is Clara. Clara Vance." The woman froze. The pen dropped from her hand, echoing loudly as it hit the linoleum floor. She stared at me, her eyes widening in absolute shock, gasping so loudly that a few people nearby turned to look. "Clara Vance?" she repeated, her hands trembling as she opened her leather briefcase. "Your grandmother was Eleanor Vance?" "Yes," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "How do you know my grandmother?" The woman took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Clara, my name is Victoria Sterling. I am the senior partner at Sterling & Associates, one of the top estate law firms in the state. I have been looking for you for 3 days." I blinked, confused. "Looking for me? Why?" Victoria looked around the crowded shelter, a profound, solemn expression on her face. 4 years ago, your grandmother Eleanor came to my office. She didn't have a modest little bank account, Clara. She was the sole owner of Vance Enterprises, a real estate holding firm worth over $45 million. She kept her wealth entirely hidden from Arthur and Beatrice because she saw through their greed, their cruelty, and their toxicity. I sat frozen, my breath caught in my throat. When she wrote her final will, Victoria continued, leaning closer, she left a strict, unbreakable legal trust. She knew your parents. She predicted, down to the exact dynamic, that the moment she was gone, Arthur and Beatrice would bleed you dry and eventually cast you aside. Victoria pulled out a thick, red-stamped legal document. Grandmother Eleanor instructed me that her entire $45 million estate, along with 100% ownership of Vance Enterprises, was to be placed into a blind trust. The condition to unlock it was very specific. "What condition?" I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "The condition was that you had to be pushed to absolute rock bottom by your family," Victoria revealed. She wrote in her will, "If my son and his wife ever prove their ultimate cruelty by making my beloved Clara homeless, the trust immediately dissolves, and every single asset transfers to Clara instantly." Victoria smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "She left a note for you. It says, 'My sweet Clara. If you are reading this in a shelter, I am so sorry you had to endure their cruelty. But now, you will never suffer again. Take what is rightfully yours and sweep them away.'" This is where everything changed. The next morning, Christmas Day, Arthur, Beatrice, and Julian were sitting in their cozy living room, opening expensive gifts. Suddenly, 3 heavy black SUVs pulled into their driveway. Arthur looked out the window, muttering, "Who on earth is that?" The front door didn't just get a knock, it was met with the authoritative presence of 2 uniformed sheriff deputies, accompanied by Victoria Sterling in her sharp suit, and me. I walked into the house wearing a tailored cashmere coat, standing tall, my face deadpan and calm. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I didn't lose my composure for a single second. Beatrice gasped. "Clara? What is the meaning of this? How dare you bring police into our home on Christmas Day? Get out of my house!" "Actually, Beatrice," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly cool tone, "this isn't your house." Julian stood up, throwing his controller down. "Are you crazy? Dad bought this house 15 years ago." Victoria stepped forward, opening her briefcase and handing a stack of legal notices to Arthur. "Mr. Vance, 15 years ago, your mother, Eleanor Vance, purchased this property through a subsidiary company under Vance Enterprises and permitted you to live here rent-free under a revocable lease agreement. As of midnight last night, Miss Clara Vance is the sole owner and CEO of Vance Enterprises." Arthur's face went dead pale as the color drained from his lips. What are you talking about? Eleanor was broke." "Your mother was a multi-millionaire," Victoria replied smoothly. "And because of a legal clause triggered by your action of making Clara homeless on December 22nd, Clara has officially executed her right to terminate your lease effective immediately." "You can't do this. It's Christmas!" Beatrice screamed, her voice cracking into a high-pitched panic. "Remember that detail," I said quietly, looking Beatrice straight in the eyes. "You threw me into a blizzard 3 days before Christmas. You gave up your right to mercy. The downfall was swift, mathematical, and absolute. First went the house. The deputies gave Arthur and Beatrice exactly 30 minutes to grab their personal clothes in trash bags, the very same trash bags they had thrown my life into 3 days prior. They watched in horror as locksmiths changed the deadbolts on the front door. Second went the cars. The luxury SUV Arthur drove and the sports car Julian paraded around town were both registered under Vance Enterprises' corporate fleet. Process servers towed them out of the driveway right in front of the entire neighborhood, who had gathered on their porches to watch the spectacle unfold. Third went their finances. Arthur had been skimming money from a small family business account that, unbeknownst to him, was actually subsidized by one of Eleanor's trusts. Victoria's team launched an immediate forensic audit, and within 48 hours, federal fraud charges were filed against Arthur for tax evasion and embezzlement. When Julian tried to apply for a loan to get an apartment, his credit score tanked to 0 because I revoked his status as an authorized user on the corporate credit cards he had been secretly draining for years. They were ruined, completely and utterly stripped of everything they used to intimidate me. 2 months later, I sat in the executive office on the top floor of the Vance Enterprises building, overlooking the city skyline. A knock came at my mahogany door, and Victoria walked in, holding a folder. "They're asking for a settlement, Clara," Victoria said softly. "Arthur and Beatrice are living in a tiny, run-down one-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Julian is working night shifts as a dishwasher just to pay their grocery bills. Your father's legal fees are consuming whatever savings they had left. Beatrice wrote a letter begging for forgiveness. She handed me the letter. I read the frantic, desperate scribbles from Beatrice, apologizing for how they treated me, begging for money, calling me their beloved daughter. I didn't feel anger, nor did I feel a need to gloat. I simply folded the letter, placed it into the shredder, and watched it turn into dust. "Tell them the CEO of Vance Enterprises has no comment," I said calmly. Grandmother Eleanor knew that true revenge wasn't just about destroying your enemies. It was about elevating yourself so far above them that their cruelty could never touch you again. I walked over to the window, looked up at the clear winter sky, and smiled. I was warm, I was safe, and I was finally free. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more revenge stories every week.